So when you talk about ER diagrams, remember that you are talking about primarily entities, attributes, and their relationships. Let us see what do you mean by entities and the attributes. So whenever you talk about the entities and the attributes, you are talking about the granular details of your database structure. So when you talk about the granular details, means what? Whenever you get the requirement from the client, you need to extract how many entities are there. In the database context, entity refers to a distinct identifiable object, concept, thing in the real world that is represented within a database. It represents a unique piece of information that the database stores and manages. Entities can be tangible or intangible, can represent the various aspects such as the physical objects, abstract concepts, events, or the relationship. Examples of the entities could be customer, product, employee, order, student, book, department. Anything. Car is an entity. Then you can say mobile is again entity. Your client has given a requirement something like this. I want to develop the mobile, which would be having SIM card, which would be having one number, which would be having one antenna and the battery. This is the requirement. So from this requirement, you will create the entity, and name of the entity is mobile. Name of the entity is what? Mobile. So you will ask me a question, why we are doing all these things? Remember that entity relationship diagrams are the visual representations. Now from this representation, your client is going to understand, stakeholders are going to understand what is the database. Developers are going to understand what is the database. Testers are going to understand what is the database. Right? That's why we need to define it in the pictorial form. And one of the main aspect of that is entity. So when you say entity, entity can be anything which represents a real world entity. And in the database form, the entity would be getting converted into the table. Database administrators will look at your ER diagram and they will convert entities to the table. Right. Now, entities possesses the attributes that describes their characteristics of the properties. For example, mobile we have taken, or we have taken the customer entity, right? May have customer ID, customer name, address, email. Customer ID, name, address, and email. Attributes define the specific data elements associated within an entity. Remember that. So every entity has some properties. If you say animal, animal would be having legs, eyes, tail, running speed, right? Carnivorous or not. These are the properties of the animal. So in the terms of the database, entity represents one real world aspect, entity, and the attributes represents the column in the databases. Attribute represents what? Column in the databases. Okay. So that's what the attributes are. Every attribute is having attribute define a specific data elements associated with an entity and contribute to the overall representation and the functionality of the database. Right? That's what the entity is. Now, when you talk about the attribute, attribute can be of the different type. If you observe carefully, entity, a real world concept, attributes, the features of that entity. In the database, entity is nothing but the table and the features are nothing but the columns. Now these attributes can have different types. simple attribute, composite attribute, derived attribute, multi-valued attribute, key attribute, foreign key attribute. Well, key and foreign key are same, but I have distinguished just to show you there is a special key, and the null valued attribute. Now, what is a simple attribute? Now consider that customer. Again, customer would be having a date of birth, customer would be having name, customer would be having age, right? Simple attribute. They don't have any special thing, they are simple. So you would be having a customer, and to the customer you would be having a lot of attributes. So these are the simple attributes. Now composite attributes. One attribute, when you say name, name can be first name, middle name, last name. So this name can be, for name is composed of multiple simple attributes. Name is composed of multiple simple attributes, and that is nothing but the composite attribute. Remember that in the ER diagram, simple attribute, we are going to see how it is going to be depicted in the ER diagram. We are just understanding concept over here. Composite attribute composed of multiple simple attributes, right? It represents a group of related data elements such as name, first name. Name can be divided, three things can club together which becomes one name. That is the composite attribute. Derived attribute. Now see, if you have a date of birth, you can calculate the age automatically. If you have date of birth, you can calculate the age automatically. Derived attribute. That thing is called as derived attribute. If you have date of birth, you can calculate age. Derived attribute. Multi-valued attribute. So one attribute can have the multiple values, comma separated values. Mobile. One customer can have 5 mobiles. So you will write mobile number 1, comma mobile number 2, comma mobile number 3. That is attribute which would be having multiple values. Multiple values. Mobile numbers. That is nothing but what? Multi-valued attribute. Now key attribute, remember that each entity data can be identified by one unique number or unique string, right? So that unique thing is called as key. We are going to see in the next session. A key attribute uniquely identifies the entity. So that is the key attribute. That is what? Key attribute. Foreign key attribute. Key attribute identifies entity uniquely. Foreign key, it represents the relationship with other table or other entity. Sorry, in this case, it represents relationship with the other entity. That is the foreign key attribute. Null valued attribute. Attribute may have value, may not have value. It indicates what you can say null valued attribute. So these are few types of the attributes, and every single thing is represented in different notation. We are going to see in next few topics how we are going to represent this in the ER diagram. I hope you have understood this theoretical session. Remember that whenever you learn the database, a lot of concepts might be theoretical, right? But these are very important things. I hope you have understood. If you have understood, write it in the comment box. If you have any questions, write it in the comment box. Thank you.